Hi, my name is Kiera Scott, and this is my story. I grew up in a single-family Catholic home. I didn't know my dad growing up. He was an addict. I never met him. When I was a kid, my mom got married, and when I was about 9, they got divorced. That was when I learned the fun stuff, that he wasn't my dad. And I had a sister somewhere. It was kind of cool. Going into high school and only having one parent, kind of got away with a lot of stuff. Did some really stupid stuff. In high school, I did drugs and drank a lot of alcohol. It's only by God's grace I'm still here, because there's many times that I shouldn't have been. I used to drink and drive all the time, come home whenever I wanted to. My mom, after the divorce, started dating a bunch of guys. It was a different guy every week, every day, every other day. And she just wanted us to be a happy family again, and I didn't want anything to do with it. So she did her thing and I did mine. It was almost like we were roommates. And she would go out on the weekends. She would party. I'd stay with family. For a good amount of my high school years, I stayed with my grandmother, who currently lives with me. On top of drugs and alcohol in high school and partying, I had sex before marriage and thought that I could do whatever I wanted to. Skip school all the time. I would surf all day, living in Florida. I was a high school cheerleader, so a lot of people knew me. And it was just a big group of us who did what we wanted all the time. All the teachers knew us, so we got away with a lot in school, out of school. And my best friend, who I grew up with, I've known her since we were 5. She moved here to Ohio, and I missed her terribly. So we said when we were in middle school that we were going to go to the same high school, the same college, and have kids together someday. Didn't all pan out. So after high school, I decided that I wanted to come up here and go to OSU. And lo and behold, OSU is too expensive. So out of state, I came up here and I went to community college. And I met my husband here when I came to visit my friend, Brittany. We dated for a couple years, and I met his family. They were Christians. They were different than my family. And I didn't know why. My husband, boyfriend at the time, knew that I was Catholic, and over the years he just would kind of plant seeds. And I would ask questions. He would give me answers, and I didn't quite understand why the answers were different than what I grew up with and what I knew to be true. I started going to church. His mom asked me if I would attend church with him here at Northwest almost 9 years ago. And I came, but it was different. It was really different. I was used to the rhythm of the Catholic Church, and I didn't like it here. It was loud. It was invasive to my mind and what I wanted to do with my day-to-day life. And I kept coming. Then I gradually started to like it a little bit. I enjoyed the music, I enjoyed the people, even though I didn't know anyone yet. And one day I was here with my husband and his mom, and I don't really remember what the service was about, but I knew that it was talking to me, that God was talking to me, and it was time to make change. I don't remember the date. It was a morning service. I was 22 when I accepted Christ. After I accepted Christ, John and I moved in together. We weren't married yet. And we had a child out of wedlock. Still wasn't doing things the right way. When we had our first child, we were young. God had different plans for us, but we tried to take it into our own hands. Before we were living together is when we found out we were going to have a baby. I was still in college and so was he. We didn't have any plans for a baby. No one knew but us. And God. I guess I didn't fully wrap my head around the fact that God knows everything. He knows it before we're gonna do it, before everything happens. Went to the Wellness Planning Center and paid for an abortion. And I went back to the room and he couldn't come with me. And they were doing an ultrasound. And the funniest thing happened. They measured the baby and asked me to keep still because they couldn't get any measurements because I was too nervous and the baby was moving around too much. It didn't quite make sense to me because why wouldn't they be able to get measurements unless the baby was really big? I was 22 weeks pregnant and we didn't know. And I will forever remember the day that they turned the screen and I could see that baby. I passed out. I didn't believe it. I was in shock. There was no way in my planning in my life that I could have gone 5 months and not known it. But God knew. It was that day that God saved my son's life. From me. It was May 10th, 6 years ago, that I met my son on that little tiny screen because God had different plans. And it was at that point I couldn't go through with it. They wouldn't allow me to. I was too far along. And it wasn't until later that I realized that that was God's plan, clearly not mine. And I'm forever thankful for that. I was still in college after that, and my husband was in college as well. And we told our parents, one of the hardest things we've ever done in our life, I think, that we were pregnant and how far along we actually were. And it was at that point my mom told me that I was going to be moving home, away from John, back with my mom. And I did. I was forced to move back home. I was 20 years old. and I did not know how life was going to go after that. I moved home. I moved in with my mom, who was living with her boyfriend. They weren't married. And they didn't have a very good relationship. And she didn't want her new grandson to be around it. So we moved out, and we moved into a house together, just me and my mom. And I still talked to John all the time. We hadn't broken up. We were still together. I think closer towards the end, we started to get excited. But how do you wrap your mind around a pregnancy in 3 months? Colton was born, and John flew down, and he was there just in time to see him. And after he was born, John stayed 2 weeks and had to go back to school. My family would make comments, "You're gonna be just like your mom." You're gonna be a single parent too. He's not gonna come back. I didn't want to believe it. But I didn't quite know God the way I do now. I didn't know that God had planned to fix out all of it. I didn't know that God could make beauty from ashes. I didn't know that He would take my sin and my shame, and that I could glorify Him in me. I didn't know that. I just knew that there was an opportunity to change my life. And I took it, and I trusted in God. And as Colton grew up, John wasn't there. I think he saw him once or twice in the span of 9 months. Watched him grow up through pictures and videos. And my family just continued to put us both down. Not believe in us. They weren't helpful. And John and I grew apart. It was tough. We were both saddened by our separation. But at the time, there wasn't much we could do about it. I had to figure out a job situation because I couldn't put him in daycare and work. John wasn't working because he was in college. I don't know when it was, but I just hit this stopping point, and I'd had enough. I wasn't a kid, I was a mom. I wasn't a teenager, I was a young adult. It was time for me to figure out how to do it. So I told my mom, I'm moving out. We're leaving. We're moving to Ohio, and we're going to figure this thing out. So that's when John and I moved in together, and we forced so many doors open to get there. Door after door was closed, and we forced our way through. God was clearly trying to tell us that that was not His plan, but it was ours. And we paid the consequences for it. We didn't know how to be a married couple because we weren't. We didn't know how to be parents because I was a single mom for 9 months. He didn't know how to be a dad or a husband because we weren't together. It was beyond difficult trying to figure it out. And we still didn't go to God. We started coming back to church. Colton was in the nursery here. He loved it. And I just felt this pull to be involved, to take my next step. That it can't just be salvation and then the rest of your life. That my family is so different than his. His family has Christ, and it changes you. But I didn't know that. And we came to church every Sunday, and we decided that we wanted to be married. We had always wanted to be married, just not in this sequence of events. We'd been together a couple years, and we had started planning a wedding and came to Pastor Harrell and asked him if he would marry the both of us in ceremony. And he said yes, that we had to go through some marriage counseling with him first, and we did. And I remember the first meeting that we went to, John had to meet first with Pastor Ken, and then my meeting was shortly after. And John went in and met with Pastor Ken, and I was still at home, came here afterwards to meet with Pastor Ken, and John came out and he was very quiet. And I said, how'd it go? And he said, it went okay. Your meeting's been canceled. And I said, what? Why? You had yours, now I'm supposed to have my meeting. And he said, we need to talk. And I think my heart shattered into a million pieces, because we all know what that usually means. And I was terrified, and I didn't know what he was going to say. My heart was in my throat as we had the conversation, and he said he was moving out. And I didn't understand why. I was scared. I thought that maybe it really was true what my family said. It wasn't going to work. That he didn't really care about us as much as he says he does. And little did I know that God was working on him too. So we went home. He packed his stuff, moved back to his mom's house, mom and dad's. And we lived apart for 6 months until we were married. It was the longest 6 months of my life. Every day I didn't know if he was going to come back. We got married and Colton was 1.5 years old, almost 2. It was the best day of my life. After we got married, things didn't get any better. We still argued all the time. He still lived his college life and I played mom. And I was persistent about us continuing to be at church, going to church, and wanted to be part of the church. And I begged him to come to a membership meeting, membership class here at Northwest. He was reluctant to go, but I was excited. And we became members, but had to go through some classes first, some questioning. And the one thing that I struggled with was baptism, because I was baptized as an infant. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew that I was already baptized. I agreed to do it, but I still didn't understand what it was about. I began to study to try and figure out why baptism was the next step. And read about the fruits of the Spirit, but I didn't have any of those. Read about God's salvation through Jesus and Him taking our shame and our sin, but being glorified in us. And I didn't understand how that was going to come to pass either. I found that baptism it's not salvation, but it comes afterwards. It's your outward, your public statement that you're willing to let God change your life, that you've already accepted Him, but now it's time to change and let other people know that God is changing you from the inside out. It wasn't until we started doing things God's way that blessings truly did rain down from heaven. And boy, was He changing me. And I struggled with it for a while because I was Catholic by birth. I was baptized into Catholicism, but I didn't know God in Catholicism. I didn't know salvation. I was never told that was a possibility. I didn't know you could have a relationship with God. I didn't know His authority, but also His loving mercy. And baptism was going to be that next step for me in showing my family that I'm going to allow God to make me different. And that was when I decided it was time. It was time to go public. And the big splash in 2014 in June was when I was baptized. And I was nervous beyond all imagination. Pastor Ken knew my story then. He knew what John and I had gone through. He knew how we'd been changing. He knew that we said yes to Christ and doing things His way and not living apart before we were married and not having sex before we were officially married for that length of time and respecting God, because God is no respecter of persons. And everything fell into place. And I was just being pulled closer and closer to God. Pastor Ken was so excited for me to be baptized. And he wanted me to publicly tell our church my story. And I was like, okay, I can do this. I had it all prepared. I was waiting in line, and I thought I was going to pass out. And I just remember praying before I walked down into the water to meet Pastor Ken. God, use me in whatever way you see fit. Not my words, but your words. And I walked down and I looked out into the crowd of our entire church, and I could not say a word. I don't know if it was fear or just being overcome by the excitement, the nervousness, the Holy Spirit. And I just cried. And what I said was, He saved my life, because that's what God did. I have a checkered past. I was saved through salvation, but baptism was God's time to shine. It was His moment, not mine, to brag on what He's done in my life and how He's changed me from the inside out. And then it was my time to be buried in the likeness of His death and raised in the likeness of His resurrection in His glory. And I wanted to say so much that day, but I couldn't. I was just overcome by the mercy of His love in saving me. And that's what everyone needed to know, that He truly saved my life. So Pastor Ken told my story, and I was baptized. And ever since then, things have been a little different. A lot different. I'm not the same person I was. I'm a mom. I'm a wife. but most importantly, I'm a child of God. After that, we went on to be married for a couple years. We had problems with each and every pregnancy after that. And I didn't understand why we were still having problems. I thought it was salvation, baptism, a cakewalk. But it wasn't. And we had our second child, but in the process, we almost lost her. I remember waking up one day in a pool of blood, and I was scared. I was terrified. And I just remember sobbing my way through prayers on my knees. God, save this child, please. And God is so good. He did. She was born at 36 weeks, healthy baby. Life was more interesting with two kids. And we continued our ups and downs, our trials, but each time it was just bringing us closer to Him, breaking down walls in our life, chains, working through our past, our baggage, our fears, and trusting in Him, slowly seeing who He is and knowing who we are in Christ. And then, after our second child, we had planned for a third. I was 9 weeks. He already had a name. And my doctor called to tell me we were losing this one. I didn't understand. I may never understand. But God doesn't call us to understand. He calls us to be obedient. It was an ectopic pregnancy, and it almost killed me. God wasn't done yet. He's still not done. It was the darkest day of my life. I didn't understand why. I never asked why, but I didn't understand. I remember after getting off of the phone and sobbing uncontrollably for probably 3 hours, I kneeled down next to my bed and opened up Psalm 119. It was the longest 3 hours of my life. But I was so blessed to hear what God had to tell me. I remember reading what David wrote. It is good that I was afflicted, that I may know you and know God's statutes. And it was then that I realized this isn't for me. My children were His before they were mine. That He's safer in heaven than here on earth. But that God was going to get glory from this. And I leaned heavily on Him. We all did. That was my Gethsemane. Nobody else understood what I was going through. I didn't know anyone who understood what I was going through. My husband was sad. but didn't quite understand what it felt like to lose someone from your body. And it hurt. It was so painful, and I was so sick. And I just kept praying and praying and praying, and I knew that God would get glory from it, but I couldn't see when or how or where. But I knew there wasn't a why. He deserves it. He deserves all the glory from my life that he can get. And after we lost Brennan, it was then that I just gave everything to him, and for his glory, no matter the cost. And that was hard, because there's a lot at stake. And God continued to bless our family and amaze us. He never ceases to amaze me. There are times where we're in a bind, or we have no idea how a certain situation is going to work out. But God does. And it works out so seamlessly, so beautifully. And that's what baptism is. It's his seamless beauty being shown through our commitment, through our surrender to him, and our willingness to show people publicly. I have been saved by his mercy and his grace, and I want you to know that God is changing me. I'm Kira Scott, and that's my story.